Today we're going to talk about creative block and a psychological perspective on this phenomenon. Have you ever noticed how creativity may not come naturally, or as a friend of mine says, it tends not to come in through the front door? For example, for me, when I have an open hour or two where I can create some music, that's one of my hobbies, I'll oftentimes find myself curiously distracted by doing anything but what it is I set out to do. So I'll find myself obsessed with vacuuming the floor or washing dishes. This phenomenon has plagued me throughout my life, and I've wondered about this. I don't think that creativity can be staged, so it's not about that. But for somebody that loves creative projects as much as I do, music, art, poetry, I'm a drummer, drumming, I wonder why I shoot myself in my foot as often as I do when it comes to the actual opportunity to create. So what gives? So what I want to do today is call some attention to what we refer to commonly as creative block. And namely, I want to explore it from a psychological and maybe in some ways spiritual perspective. Psychologists have studied theories of creativity for generations, and one thing that they agree upon is that in order to be creative, we have to surrender. And what do they mean by surrender? What they mean is that we have to surrender cognitive control. The creative act requires letting go of overthinking it. The problem is, from a psychological perspective, is that my sense of self, your sense of self, is based in great part on our thinking. And so the idea of letting go of thinking, letting go of cognitive control, takes us in the opposite direction of what we need for a sense of psychological comfort, stability, soothing, staying glued together. So if you think about it, when I sit down to create something, for me a piece of music, I'm going to stop thinking and call that fun. You've got to be kidding, it doesn't work that way. So to the mind-made self, which is the way that psychology talks about the ego, what we're talking about in terms of surrendering to creative flow is tantamount to death. I don't think it's overstating it. In fact, I have a book that is, the title of it is something like Death and Creativity, and it looks at creativity as a form of death to the thinking self. In this context, then, it's no big surprise, or should be no big surprise, that to let go into creativity is going to be accompanied by a fair bit of distraction. It's what psychologists call resistance, and in fact, that has been my experience. This resistance has the capability of undermining the whole creative enterprise. It reminds me of what psychiatrist Carl Jung said. He said when it comes to creating something new, whether it's a piece of art or our lives, that the work of creativity is what he called in Latin the opus contra naturam. That translates literally as the work against nature. I think of it as going against the stream. And then it begins to make sense why I resist it, because I'm literally going against my nature, which is to hang on to my mind-made sense of self, my ego. And even though in my mind I think of creativity as maybe being recreational, in fact, if my psyche is processing this as a form of death, it's no accident then, or it's a big surprise that I don't cooperate. What I'm hoping from this little bit here on creativity and creative block is to maybe grant some grace, maybe for us to be patient with ourselves. It's interesting, the psychologist Rollo talked about this phenomenon. He has a book called The Courage to Create, and you can get the essence of the book just from what we've said. It takes tremendous courage to go upstream to create. Thank you.